Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive Perspective. Of course, war is all over the place now, from Ukraine down into Iran and across West Asia. We're seeing missiles flying, we're seeing death on a scale which yet again is going to sicken us all. We just seem to be ruled by psychopaths, and we got to make sense of it, because without understanding the root cause of this problem, how are we going to resolve this kind of cycle of forever wars? Well, who better than two guests who have a great deal of admiration for Scott Ritter, military analyst extraordinaire and also social media phenomena, and no less of a personality is Ryan Dawson, one of the first people to call out the whole Epstein Class and to defrock the Epstein regime, which is now also, I think, at the heart of most of these wars. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to kick off with Ryan on this. Geopolitically, of course, we can see that these wars have been going on. I mean, I'll go back to, of course, we could go back as far as Vietnam and even further, but you have to have a starting point. But the wars in West Asia, I would say the first Gulf War was Saddam Hussein versus Ayatollah Khomeini and the Iran-Iraq War, which had the involvement of Western powers as well. And since then, we've been in non-stop war in that region. And I think to offer context of who's behind these wars, because on the front of it, everybody looks at the US, everybody looks at the industrial military complex of the United States. But is there something more we should know, Ryan, in terms of who benefits from these wars and why these wars have been enacted? Is it just state powers fighting each other for competitively, or is there more to it?
Well, it's a mix of things. Seldom is there a war because of a reason. But the driving force, if you look at both wars in Iraq, for example, some of it's ideological, some of it's resource war. But when you say the military-industrial complex, or you say the Americans, it's almost inseparable from AIPAC and the Israeli lobby. And if you drill down specifically at each lie about weapons of mass destruction, babies on incubators, et cetera, you'll find a common pattern. And I hear all these excuses, oh, it's for oil, oh, it's for the petrodollar. It's the opposite. When you sanction a place, you don't get any oil. And they were already on the oil for food program anyway. They had the oil. And when you do that, you push people away from the dollar. When they see what they did to Russia, when they see what they did to Iran, they don't want to use dollars because their assets can be frozen, taken away just like that. It actually does the opposite. This is in Israeli interest. You can see it from Netanyahu's book. You can got that infamous incident of Wesley Clark bringing down the script saying we're going to attack all these countries in this many years. And this, every single lie. I mean, even in the second Iraq war, they set up an office within an office in the Pentagon called the Office of Special Plans under Doug Feith, but really Richard Pearl was sort of the brainchild of that, where they cherry-picked and fabricated information to gin up a war with Iraq, including lying about anthrax and falsely connecting Saddam Hussein to 9/11, which he had nothing to do with. This war, they haven't really been clear on a unified front on what the lie is. It was to help Iranian protesters, liberate women, stop a nuclear program that doesn't exist. They keep changing rationales. And they did that a little bit with the second Gulf War, to liberate the Kurds was one of the things. But WMD was the main legal reason, because when Colin Powell went to the UN, with a little mock vial of anthrax, it was to reinforce a resolution 1441 stipulating they couldn't have WMDs. And they didn't have they had them, but they hadn't gotten rid of them. Scott was part of that, making sure that they got rid of them. So it's been lie upon lie upon lie. But this war, Iran was very measured. When Pete Hegseth came on and said, we didn't start this war, that's a lie. Israel started this war three times. And, under like Scott brought up perfidy, it's when you, under either a white flag or negotiations, you actually use that as a smokescreen so you can attack. They did that over and over again. They did it to Russia. They did it to Iran 3 times. And the public is not stomaching this. The way they did the first Gulf War, you could see yellow ribbons on every car. There was no real social media, internet, so the media dominated. The second Gulf War, millions protested before it started. This third war, this war with Iran, nobody believes it. And they thought, I don't know what they were thinking. These holy roller Christian evangel fundamentalists thought that we could do a decapitation strike. So maybe they had a window of opportunity to kill the Ayatollah, so they did it, and they thought Iran was going to collapse. I'm not sure, because I'm not retarded, so I don't know how they think. But that didn't work. So they've gone after the soft belly. The Gulf Arabs are getting smacked, especially Bahrain. I think that's going to be the first one to fall, followed by Kuwait, Erbil in Iraq, and then Qatar, UAE, and so on. They're getting hammered. And Israel's now tied up in a land battle with Hezbollah. They've lost 3 tanks already. And it's the weirdest way that Iran can win is the U.S. and Israel, the Zio factions, are going to run out of munitions. When you look at when Hegseth said they actually threatened American companies, like they think they can just say, hey, factory, go burr, and make more interceptors. It doesn't work like that. I used to work at Tsutohashi Nishimura Kimtech, where we made the semiconductors that go in some of these things. One of the components, they don't have the components, they don't have the supply lines, they don't have the machine tools, they don't have the machines that make the machines. You can't just make more Patriot missiles than what they have. They can make 500 or 600 a year if you include Japan. That's it. You can't just like they print money. You can't just print missiles. These are very complex machines. Some of the neon that you need that the lasers use in semiconductors for lithography comes from, guess where? Eastern Ukraine. Not now.
Wow.
60% of the rare earth you need is out of China. Like they don't have the supply lines set up. They don't have the high pressure aqua. You need to cut these things with really high pressure water. None of that exists. So you can't just go down to Alabama and say, hey, make more tubes. These things are parts made in Taiwan, parts made in South Korea, parts made in Japan, all over the world. And it would take about 24 months just to gather the components for new Patriots. That's 2 years. They don't have 2 years. They're going to run out. They're blowing through hundreds of these in a matter of days. So what are they going to do when they don't have defensive missiles?
So, Scott, this is a very damning indictment of the strategic thinking of either the Israelis or the Americans, or whoever else is involved in planning this. If we get to a situation where Iran does sustain its kind of capacity to continue the long war, if we get to a situation where munitions run out, if we get to a situation where regime change starts happening with the allies of the Americans in that region, and we get a situation where Israel no longer has that invincibility and security to fend off any enemies in the region that they regard as their enemies. They regard everybody as enemies, I think, in reality. But what do you see? What's your prediction of what this does to the Anglo-Zionist empire or the Atlantist powers? Would they get wiped out from West Asia? And what does that mean for their finances and their economic power in the future and their dominance?
I don't know. And nobody knows. That's the problem. We've entered into a path of, we were a world in transition. The day of uncontested American hegemony is over. It's past, and we have seen the world trying to transition into a more multipolar structure. And we've seen nations like Russia and China attempt to do this through the vehicle of BRICS in a controlled fashion, working not against the United States and the collective West, but with them to bring about a controlled transition. Russia and China do not seek instability. People need to understand that. So anybody who says that Russia and China are seeking the collapse of American power, you just don't know what you're talking about, because the collapse of American power simply creates a vacuum in which nothing but instability will come. They're looking for a carefully regulated, controlled transition, not to eliminate American power, but to bring American power down to levels that make sense in terms of the global community. The United States is a very big, powerful nation, a lot of resources, etc. The United States has a role to play in the world. What Russia and China do is to resize America's ambition for a role that is compatible with global reality. The United States, of course, doesn't want to do that. We make lip service to it, but you see through the National Security Strategy document and the way we're implementing, we're not only trying to, the hubris of saying that the entire Western Hemisphere belongs to us, inclusive of all the resources that we alone get to dictate. For instance, Venezuela's how Venezuela manages its oil. That's just hubris. That's arrogance. But some people thought that would take place and that we would walk away from the rest of the world. But what we're doing in Iran is clear evidence that we have no intention of disengaging from the Middle East. And so what we're seeing is the United States, rather than gracefully go along with a transition that right-sizes American ambition, that America is going to go down swinging. And this war is a war of existential proportions. The reason why we seek regime change in Iran is that the United States and the Christian Zionist component of American political power, view Iran as the major impediment to the greater Israeli fantasy of Benjamin Netanyahu and his ilk, and so Iran must be eliminated. And then the arrogance is that A, we think that we could actually achieve this, and B, that there wouldn't be any consequences for doing this. Iran has been preparing for this conflict for over 20 years. In 2005, Dick Cheney threatened Iran with war, and the Iranians took that threat very seriously. Since that time, they've broken their nation up into what I believe are 12 autonomous military districts. Each one is capable of sustaining a struggle independent of direction from Tehran. So the notion that we're going to go in with a campaign and break up Iran's strategic command and control, that we're going to somehow inhibit communications between Tehran or Mashhad, where the government's probably hiding, and these districts is absurd, because these districts are designed to operate independent of centralized control, and they are designed to carry on a struggle in accordance with pre-planned operations, which I believe in some cases is exactly what's happening. But Iran has been preparing for this fight. We haven't. And neither have the Gulf Arab states. They've been laboring under this notion of that they, let's look at the three core components of what makes a Gulf Arab state viable. First off is wealth, a lot of wealth that comes from energy. And that wealth then creates its own artificialities. That wealth feeds the political empowerment, because these people use that wealth to buy off people and to create artificial bubbles of I guess economically viable centers, and then they use it to buy the perception of security. The United States is supposed to be there as a shield to these Gulf Arab states, and through this war of existentialism with Iran, that those all three pillars have collapsed.
Right.
Iran is putting the ability to generate wealth in the region at risk. Saudi Arabia is going to lose the totality of its oil production capacity. The same with the United Arab Emirates. Qatar has already shut down liquid natural gas shipping, citing force majeure. But the Strait of Hormuz is de facto closed. This is the economic strangling of these Gulf Arab states. When you lose that wealth, they become politically not as viable as they thought they were. They're very fragile. Just ask the Khalifa family in Bahrain right now what it feels like to live in Manama, knowing that there's a couple million Bahrainis that want to drag you through the streets the way the Iraqis dragged the Hashemites back in the 1940s. And maybe the Khalifa family deserves this because they're despicable people. But so is the Al Saud family, despicable people. So are the rulers of the United Arab Emirates. There is not a single ruler in the region that deserves to rule. These are people that inherited this because of British colonialism, the British colonial past. They've abused their power and authority to enrich themselves to a sickening manner. And then they've hidden behind this artificial umbrella of security that the United States will always be there. We will sell them the weapons they need. And when push comes to shove, we will stand there and fight for them. We have abandoned them. We have abandoned them in totality. Our bases have been emptied because we don't have the courage to stand and fight. That infrastructure is being destroyed. And moreover, all the weapons that we sold them, especially their anti-ballistic missile capability, as they shoot through these weapons, they're turning to the United States and saying, we need more. And what's the United States response? Not picking up the phone. When we do reinforce the region, we do to reinforce our capacity and Israel's capacity. And this is the ultimate wake-up call to the Gulf Arab states, that Israel is the only ally that matters. The others don't matter. They're simply tools to be used, abused, and cast aside, and they're being cast aside now. This plays into Iran's hands because the Iranians are far more astute about regional realities and global realities than the Christian Zionists in the United States or the greater Israeli genocide practitioners in Israel. The Iranians understand what reality is, what really drives this system. And so the Iranians are trying to, right now, create the conditions which lead to the permanent removal of the American cancer from the Middle East, destroying the military bases. Even if the United States wanted to return, we can't until we rebuild these facilities, and we don't have the budget to do that. Now, Iran is making sure that the nations don't want to invite them back, but they're also attacking the diplomatic footprint. They're forcing the retreat of America's diplomatic arm from the region as well, the emptying of embassies, the emptying of consulates. And again, when it comes time when this war ends, and it will end, when for the United States to return, nations may say, no, we don't want you back. Let's relook at this relationship. And this is where Russia and China come in. People tend to forget, and it's something nobody's brought up, but it's like, China did broker rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Yes.
There was a time Saudi Arabia was supposed to join BRICS. Saudi Arabia made a strategic mistake, instead cycling towards the Israeli-American Zionistic fantasy realm. But Saudi Arabia, if they survive this, will understand that their future lies not with a return to the stupidity and insanity of Israel and the United States, but to redefine their relationship not only regionally with Iran and others, but also look to Russia and China as the future, to pivot to the east. And we may see a complete pivot of whatever survives this conflict, a complete pivot away from the United States, away from Europe, away from Israel. The Abrams Accord, of course, is just a giant vehicle of Israeli empowerment towards the east, towards Russia, towards China, towards BRICS, towards the Eurasian Economic Union. This is the role that Russia and China can play. Everybody said there's waiting for Russia and China to jump in militarily. That would be the dumbest thing in the world. Russia's already bogged down in Ukraine, and China doesn't have the ability to meaningfully project military power. But Russia and China are extraordinarily powerful economies with resources, known supply lines, supply chains, et cetera. And so, I think the Iranians actually have a strategic plan that they're implementing that has a viable end game. Israel and the United States initiated something they didn't understand. They're floundering right now just to come up with a way to sustain an unsustainable, unaccomplishable mission. And at the end of the day, they're going to be left holding an empty bag. So, we've talked in the past about the danger of nuclear weapons, and that's still very much the thing. But I think, Iran has a long, tough road to go. This is not going to be easy, and they are going to suffer horrific casualties. There's no doubt about that. But Iran is a nation capable of suffering horrific casualties and still surviving. I want to remind all the people who think that strategic air campaign is going to break Iran's back. Just study the strategic air campaign against Nazi Germany and the role it played in solidifying German resilience. The Germans produced more Messerschmitt fighters after the United States targeted German fighter production than they were when there was no targeting of it, because they were compelled to seek alternative ways of moving forward. I believe that the Iranians have a plan for long-term sustainment. The strategic campaign is bombing empty buildings. All the important stuff has been evacuated, and we will run out of bombs, we run out of missiles before the Iranians run out of the ability to continue to project their power regionally.
Fantastic summary. I know we've probably got you for a few more minutes, Scott, so I'll probably milk that time for what it is and then come to Ryan and let him unpack a lot of what you've said. Is that okay with you, Ryan? Usually I'd swing to or fro, but I know that Scott's
I can add on after. I know he's got an appointment. So
yeah. So just in conclusion, the plan I would have thought for that Hegseth and Trump and all the other crazies, I can only describe them, within the Knesset, etc., was Pax Judaica. There was this notion that Israel must become a primary power, and that almost would predicate the withdrawal of America anyway, because if they were going to start building up Israel into a primary power that actually had these satellites and what I call the Zio-Arab states under their auspices, and then America could have pulled out, and there was this idea that maybe they would only focus on the Western Hemisphere, and that was where they were going to milk their sort of financial power from, and you leave this Central Asian area to Israel. Was that ever really a doable plan, you think? Was that just ridiculous from the outset?
Oh no, it was a very doable plan. I mean, we are actually moving in the direction to make that viable because the Gulf Arab states were going along with it. I mean, when you're asking people to do something, and most people would say, "Well, that's illogical." I mean, why would Gulf Arab states subordinate themselves completely to Israel? It makes no sense. But that's what the Abrams Accords mandate, and the Gulf Arab states were doing this because their leadership isn't about the people. Their leadership isn't about what. And Ryan's raising something up. I'm sure it's another chart that
it's probably the Epstein class. It's probably a list of the Epstein class, which I was alluding to at the beginning to say that the US and the Israelis, you can't seem to disconnect them from money and power. It seems as though, the international corporations, the links that, for instance, Epstein had, seem to link the US power elite with the Israeli power elite and well beyond. So this oligarchy is also in on the act because they're the ones who have the corporations which also supply those weapons. They are the ones who also seem to run the American economy, or actually it's indebted to them. They do have a stake in this kind of forever war business.
Let me throw in a Game of Thrones reference here. I don't know if everybody watches the Game of Thrones, but
yes.
There was a character there, Peter Littlefinger.
Oh yes,
and he ran brothels. He was sort of the Game of Thrones Epstein. He had all the little secrets, dirty, malicious secrets on everybody, and he was having out with Cersei Lannister, and he talked about power. And in the middle of their fight, she ordered her guys to grab Peter, and said, "Cut his throat." And he's like, complain, "Wait a minute, you can't. I'm the guy that controls." And they're going with the knife. They're going to cut his throat. And then right before they cut his throat, she says, "Stop." And she turns to him and says, "That's power." So I don't really give a damn about Epstein's files and all this stuff. And Iran doesn't care about them either. Power is what Iran is doing right now. This game that Israel's been playing, this stupid game, this criminal game, this sickening game of corrupting people for money, that's just a game that people who don't have power play. Because at the end of the day, let's just be frank, Israel is a pathetic little nation of 9 million people that could be wiped off the face of the earth like that. We give them power because we've allowed them to create the conception of corruption. And corruption is a concept. You are only corrupt if you're in a system that recognizes that corruption and you somehow allow that corruption to affect it. But at the end of the day, the way you resolve corruption is you put everybody up against the wall and you shoot them, or you put them in the street and you hang them. Now, we're not going to do that in a free and democratic society, but Iran is doing that right now. They're not playing the Epstein game. They're playing the "we're going to kill you" game. They're playing "we're going to destroy you" game. And so the West, again, that just shows the fundamental weakness of the West, where we become so morally weak that we allow an Epstein-like class to control us through corruption. But at the end of the day, the way you resolve this is you grab Littlefinger and you slice his throat. That's power. And Iran right now is wielding that power. Russia is too. Look at Russia. I'm not saying that Russia is incorruptible, but you have Russia that has defined, family values, national values that are the exact opposite of what Epstein, is exploiting here. We have no values in the West. We have no values whatsoever. The fact that we have a class of politicians who have clearly been compromised doing the very things that destroy societies. If you can't protect your children, then your society ceases to exist, because your children are the future of your society. The family unit is that which raises children. When you allow modes of thinking that destroy the family unit. I mean, again, I'm somebody who believes that every person should be allowed to do what they want to do as long as they don't impact others. But when you promote transgenderism, when you promote homosexuality, what you're promoting is an inability to sustain your society, because the society is sustained by a man and a woman marrying, having children, raising those children in conformance with societal norms and values. And when you create a predatory class like Epstein class that preys on children, that tolerates homosexuality to the extent above all else, that promotes transgenderism to the point that American parents have no ability to intercede to prevent the physical dismemberment of their children, that's the end of your society. Russia has drawn a line and said, no, Russia will survive. China has drawn a line and said, no, China will survive. The United States, the West, being driven because if, again, I'll let Ryan get to this because this is his expertise and I may be getting well out of my comfort zone. I am out of my comfort zone because Ryan knows that I don't normally like to talk about these things. But, when the Epstein class, and Ryan can define them as he will, people like Shmuley Botek, who is a prominent pro-Israeli Zionist Jew in America. When a father promotes his daughter's business of sexual toys, that's the end of the family unit. And this is what Israel does. This is what the Israelis do. This is what the Epstein class does. They prey on the base desires of mankind. And when you remove societal norms and values from the equation, the base desires play out. And then you become corrupted and you become manipulated. And this is what Israel has done to the United States. This is what Israel has done to the West. This is what Israel is doing to the world. And Israel must be eliminated because it represents one of the greatest threats to the continued existence of civilized society in the world today. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Scott. And I know you had to rush off and you've given us extra time. So I'll let you go if you have to, whenever you like, Scott.
Do I get a thumbs up, Ryan? Did I get it partially right?
I think so. I'm going to fill in some holes, but he's right. Like Epstein is not, it's a byproduct of cultural rot, not the cause of it. Like Epstein wouldn't be able to function if you didn't have such a debaucherous, amoral at best society that had people willing to participate in these kind of things. It's a lot of money laundering and also, the blackmail. It's not that. It's more of an insurance policy. With the problem with these people, you have to stop looking at states of having national interests as they're like, oh, this state would do this because that would be good for the general public. It's the donor class uses the state as an enforcement arm for their own profiteering. And these people, it's on big club. George Carlin put it in very well. It's the big club that you're not in it. It's transnational. They don't have any loyalty to a particular piece of soil or anything like that. Like they are loyal to themselves. And they engage in this debaucherous behavior because it's sort of a byproduct of that type of personality, where they will the worst things. They prey on kids. Like why would you even want to do that? They're sick. Right. And they're predatory.
Make that connection a little clearer for me, because one of the first sites. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing you again, and good luck. So, Ryan, tell me about this, the connection between war, children. I mean, it's now pretty obvious that the genocide in Gaza targeted children in a massive way. There was infanticide in a massive way, not just the bombs and the missiles, but also the malnutrition that resulted and the pregnancies that were
baited
aborted.
them with food trucks, and then shot the kids that went to get the food.
Oh God!
Like, you're talking about real evil. Not most things can be explained, like someone who does something that's wrong, but they thought it was right. These people know it's wrong. They don't care. They'll shoot kids. They think it's funny. Like, look, they're starving. Send in the bread trucks, and then just gun down the crowd when they go to get food.
And doesn't war, I mean, and let me connect it to the Iran situation, because one of the first things they did was fire missiles at girls and sports girls who were based around that area. 165 dead up to the last count I heard yesterday. Again, there's this kind of
12 years old.
Is there a connection between this, this psychopathy in terms of killing kids and not having empathy for them and civilians, but at the same time also having this entire industry of trafficking children, which actually could profit from war, because in a war you get chaos, you get refugees, you get disruption, you get orphans. There's a dark side to that there may well be an entire industry that's operating within that to actually farm children.
You get men trafficked too, because they end up as mercenaries when they're in desperate situations, and women are sex trafficked and boys are sex trafficked. Even bodies are robbed for organs. They don't have a bottom, and it's hard for a sane, functioning person with empathy to understand how anybody could not only not have any morals, but it's not that they're just unbothered by killing children. They relish it. They delight in it. They enjoy causing other people pain. They've labeled others as Amalek, you dumb goyim. It's an ideology of hatred and deception. And if you take it as like a fundamentalist Jew, then the whole world's divided into us and them, and they gave themselves the superior class, and God's a real estate agent, and all this land belongs to your tribe, and you can just murder everyone. This is a society in Israel that didn't mind prison rape. They broke in to get people out, and the only reason they were in any trouble was because they filmed it. That they did it didn't matter. Whenever they can deny it, they will. Settlers routinely burn down houses. At most, they get administrative detention. When they get out of there, they're heroes. It's a sick society. It's a sick society to just bulldoze down someone's house or just move into their living room and say, God gave it to me. That's truly insane. But they really believe this.
And the Christian Zionists, the Hegseth types who vindicate their support of Israel, a nation which seems to be harboring and it actually is very happy to harbor the likes of Roman Polanski, known pedophiles and rapists, etc. It's known as the capital or the center for where these guys escape if they can't get away with it, or when the law starts catching up with them. I mean, I'm going to make this connection because it's connected. This kind of desire to also, I saw the military men, the IDF. Bizarre, going into the wardrobes and cupboards of Palestinians and getting out the ladies' underwear and whatnot and wearing it and doing sort of weird dances. I mean, there was almost like an overspill of this kind of dark, hedonistic underbelly, which Christian Zionism, given that Christianity is supposed to have morality, is very bizarre for it to side with this sort of culture. Where does that come from? The whole phenomenon of Christian Zionism seems perplexing.
These dispensationalist Christians, about 3/4 of the Bible is the Old Testament. So it's straight out of Judaism. And so if you ignore the words of Christ, which I would argue makes you not a Christian, but if you ignore that and you focus on Old Testament and the Old Testament law, the book of Leviticus, the books of Deuteronomy and stuff where they stone people to death and rape and murder and conquer their neighbors and kill and conquest, that's what you're going to end up with. And Hegseth, he's got like Christian paraphernalia tattoos all over his body. He's one of these end timesers, which is based on the book of Revelations. And they think that they can force this to happen, like force prophecy. A lot of them hate Muslims. They don't differentiate between Shia, Sunni. They don't sell any difference between Iran and Al-Qaeda. It doesn't matter. They're all just Tawhid, Muslims, sand, nimbas, or whatever. True ignorance, true prejudice. And it's really towards anyone that isn't them. But in that, you got your Huckabee types, who he literally thinks the earth is 6,000 years old, doesn't believe in dinosaurs, who just takes the Bible stories not as parables and metaphors and lessons, but as like literal. Like they actually had the talking sheep and stuff like that. He takes it literally, and he thinks that you have to bless Jews. Ted Cruz is like this too. But I think that's all a smokescreen for profiteering through Israel's regional ambitions and wars. War profiteering, disgusting, and they don't care. As long as they personally benefit, it's not in American interest. It's not in anyone's interest. It's in their personal interest if they can get self-aggrandizement by insider trading and profiteering. And this Epstein class, they just look for places to steal, to rape. They stole from the Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund, as we talked about last time. They don't even flinch. It's like only wrong if you get caught. There's no morality there. And I think this is symptomatic of a culture that is rotted down to this Machiavellian might makes right mentality, which you see from the top down, from the president on, the mass media. It's all like, if you can do it, then it's right. Just by the sheer ability to do it makes it right, which means nothing's right, because that just means you can do whatever you want.
Well, my last thought and question, and I think I'd probably like to go on with this and maybe revisit it in another show, but this battle between Iran and the US and Israel, when it's looked at from this lens as well, is interesting, because there is a moral issue here, because Sayyid Ali Khamenei represents a certain model of character, a man of virtue ethics, a sort of family man, a man who looked after his parents when they were dying and long before that, and sacrificed all the way. There are personalities, and on the other side we see Donald Trump, a man who's essentially in the Epstein files and very, very likely to be have been part of that paedophile network in a very, very active way. It's getting covered up and it's getting whatever, you know.
Minimal lecherous pervert that cheated on all his wives. Like, and just, he ripped people off. He worked with the mob. So did Witkoff. So did Kushner. Kushner's father is a convicted felon. These people are criminals. And they're as childish as it gets. I mean, Trump was not tweeting, Truth Socialing, whatever. He put a post out saying, "Oh, we can make ammo forever. We're never going to run out." Now, why would you feel the need to say that? He said, "We're going to stop all trade with Spain because Spain doesn't want to let them use their airspace or refit and refuel there." And I would ask, why are you backed all the way up to Spain? Did something happen in Cyprus? Because that's their main base to do that. The Navy can go to Naples, I guess. Or Naples really doesn't have enough for what they need. That Miranda's pushed them back. Trump is just talking. It reminds me of that scene of Hitler moving around invisible armies. He's like, "Well, we'll just put the 8th Division here." Like, that doesn't exist, sir. He's sitting there saying, "Oh yeah, we'll just up production." Like, you can't. You physically cannot make more interceptors
Delusional.
fast enough. Yeah, he's totally delusional. Hegseth, same way. And this is what happens. You have people think like God is going to give you a victory. No, technology does, and you don't have it. You didn't build it. You don't have the manufacturing. You don't have the components. You blew your wad. There's no strategy here. Tactically, I'll give them the nod. I think they're pretty good at being sneaky and murdering. They're good at it. But what's the exit ramp? Let's say the decapitation strike doesn't work and Iran doesn't fold. What was plan B? I don't think there was a plan B. Just keep bombing them until they surrender. It's 90 million people in a place covered with mountains. You don't have enough bombs. Even if they had no air defense, that doesn't work. So I think what they're going to do is they're trying, and France will do this too, they're going to try and whip up some Kurdish mercenaries to go into Iran, who is they're going to get starched. But this shows like, we'll send in the pawns, send in the Kurds, because the U.S. can't stomach the casualties, because the public already didn't want this war. And with more body bags coming home, they're really going to lose it, which is one good thing I can say about American people. They were outraged about Epstein. They're outraged, most of them, about this war. Whereas the Israelis, they're fully behind their government. They don't even care if they rape prisoners. They want more dead Palestinians. They want to kill everyone. So at least Americans are dragged in unwillingly by their politicians. The Israelis froth at the mouth for blood. They want to kill all the goyim.
Well, one of the things that's also concerned me is the anti-imperialist movement here, the left in particular, which often now gets accused of being hijacked and being essentially controlled opposition. But they, interestingly, quite often back the Pahlavists, those people who want the Shah back in power, and then they're sort of fanboys of that whole scenario. And what they say is actually, yes, bomb my own people. Essentially, that's the first bizarre thing, that they want their own people bombed in order to smash the government. And there's also this notion that that somehow there is going to be a better world after this, and that this morality issue, again, coming back to that Iran and the establishment there, which stands for social conservatism, really, let's put it that way, as close to any definition you can have. Yet here, people have been cheerleading the very people who are into pushing the Epstein ideology, the whole kind of hedonistic, pedophilic ideology, and they've been blaming Iranians about their abuse of women, for instance, or their human rights issues. In fact, that was a major part of the entire campaign to overthrow the government. And here we've
always guilty of their own accusations.
Sorry?
Always.
Yes.
They're always guilty of their own accusations.
So projecting.
And they used to talk about women's rights. So what, for OnlyFans and abortion? You guys rape kids. You made an organization to do this. And it wasn't just Epstein. You had Robert Miller, you had Peter Nygaard, Robert Kraft. These people engage in this. You had Keith Raniere.
And Ryan, do these guys have connections with? Do they have connections with Israel and Zionism as well? A lot of these people.
What do you think happens to female prisoners in Israel from Palestine? What do you think? They're raping the men. What do you think happens to the girls?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's horrible to even think of. These are people, they poured gasoline down a teenager's mouth and lit him on fire from the inside out like a candle. They torture. And I don't just mean waterboarding. I mean medieval style torture to people. They're coming out all crippled and maimed. A lot of them die in the prisons. They don't have a problem with rape. Over and over again, Colombia, Brazil, like the Israelis get caught with organized rape tourism. It's just something they do. They have brothels in Tel Aviv where young Ukrainians are forced to work there. It's sex slavery, and it just gets a nod. Like the general public's like, well, she's not a Jew, so it doesn't matter. Rape the goy. It doesn't. The natural empathy you should have for all people in the world, it's been brainwashed out of them. They don't care. Right now in the shelters, the non-Jews are being told, you can't come down, they're too full. But they can bring their pets. So a dog can go in the shelter, but not a worker from India or Thailand. Go sleep in the subway. This is how these people behave.
Okay, so concluding the end game to all this, if they are unable to bring Iran to heel, do you think this signals the beginning of the end of Israel and the beginning and end of US international power? I mean, the beginning of the end. Of course, they're a huge power.
It'd be the beginning of the end, because Israel will never have the place that it had before this war started. I can see what the U.S. could offer Iran, and they have to be sincere about it. The two things: no more footprint in the Middle East, so that all those little fiefdoms on the Strait of Hormuz, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, get out, and sanction relief. That's the two things that are pretty. Sanction relief's big, and removing, Sykes-Picot's finished. Get out. But I would ask for more. I'd ask Israel to get rid of their settlements. But we're going to have some sort of, they're going to have to negotiate, because they're going to run out. And Iran, they have plenty of drones. They have plenty of ballistic missiles. And without defense, they're just going to have their choice of what they want to blow up in Israel. And that's almost the best scenario, is if they don't negotiate and they just go ahead and make Israel burn, because there's no other solution to these psychopaths. All they understand is pain. They try to negotiate in good faith, like from the Obama, Biden, Trump. They, with all in the game with the nuclear enrichment and stuff, they abide the rules. They let the IAEA in. They did inspections. They did. Even recently, they said, okay, we'll hand over our enriched material. And then Israel preemptively went and started the war. There was never a real negotiation. It was a smokescreen so they could get in position to attack. And Israel jumped the gun. I really doubt with 11 carriers that the U.S. wanted 2 for this war. But Trump's not going to admit that. He's like, oh no, my hand wasn't forced. If anything, I forced their hand. He's the most narcissistic megalomaniac, like cartoonish level, that you wouldn't think this could exist, that anybody could be so self-absorbed more than Trump. No wonder he calls it Trump Tower, named after himself. He's really extremely childish. He's a weak man. He's not a smart person, and he surrounded himself with fellow morons. It doesn't get any dumber than Huckabee and Hegseth, but it's really pick 'em. I wish Matt Gaetz was there instead of Pam Bondi. There's a lot of things that could have changed. You got a few people in his administration RFK's intelligent, Tulsi Gabbard's intelligent, and I could only come up with those 2 names after thinking for a while. You can't even find a midwit. We don't have statesmen. Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, are you kidding me? The real estate guys? No. And Kushner's father set up sexual honey traps on his own brother-in-law and one of his own employees. And he was doing illegal campaign finance for Governor Grieve in New Jersey. He went to jail for it. He's also in the administration. Yeah, but he's a billionaire.
It's a very dark underworld there, and it's right in American people's face.
It's criminal nepotism is what it is. They all hire each other.
And the American citizens seem powerless. I mean, the elections are meaningless. If Biden, who had the similar sort of track record and background, to be honest, and then Trump comes in, and then if they bring somebody else in, what are the chances he'll be any better? It seems like they're on a cycle of psychopaths.
Well, you're correct, but there's been a game changer, and that's the breakdown of the media monopoly.
Right.
With Substack, X, Rumble, and so on, Telegram especially, nobody would have any correct information on this war without Telegram. That's with 90%. It's all coming through that.
Right.
that is allowing people to see the Epstein class. Like there are some active subpoenas. Howard Lutnick's next. They are getting grilled. Bill Clinton's hand was shaking, like what he had to see. And he was
I saw
smiling at his
that.
young photos, his wife. The Mandelson got arrested like I said he would. I wasn't very confident about that, but it happened. Andrew got arrested. They're being investigated. This Epstein didn't go away. It's off the news cycle because obviously this war is more attention, grabbing and short term important. But there are people like Thomas Massey, there are people, a few, and that's all we need, who are willing to go in and subpoena the people and start breaking this class down and starting to get rid of this rot. And really, you're right in the sense that we can't just vote in the good person because both sides are terrible. Politics is downstream from culture. Culture is downstream from media. If you fix the media, you can fix everything.
Yep.
If people like myself and Scott Ritter didn't have to be self-employed and pay for all that stuff, like they're honest people that'll give it to you straight. Like that's who ought to have the biggest microphone. That would change society. There are moral people. They don't like what's going on, but our voices are suppressed and the rotten ones are amplified. It looks like they're a majority when they aren't.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan, as ever, insightful. And, joining the dots, often people want compartmentalized discussions where they say war has got nothing to do with the other rot that's going on in society. It's all interconnected from what I can see. And thank you so much for clarifying it. Is there anywhere we can find you, Ryan, where we can let people know to find you? Substack or?
Same as Scott. It's Substack, ryandawson.org. is where you can find my articles, videos, podcasts, everything's there. It's just my name, no spaces, ryandawson.org.
Yeah.
It's free, and it's like voluntary. If you want to subscribe, you can.
Well, fantastic. I recommend,
because I'm kicked off all the payment processors.
Well, I recommend everybody supports people like yourself, the independent voices. Without you guys who do that kind of painstaking research, even we're nothing, and let alone mainstream media who will ignore you. But we need to really get a grip on our own selection. You can live in illusion or you can live in reality. Guys like Scott Ritter and Ryan will bring you to reality, and it's harsh and it's hard. It may fragment and shatter your delusional world and your safety and comfort zones, but actually for your kids, it's a far better deal, because if you go the delusional way, you're going to allow these perverts, these hedonists, these narcissists, these techno-feudalist, money-hungry profiteers to carry on shaping a future which is not good for your kids, which is going to be even more surveillance technology, which is going to be even more abuse of children. It's going to be even more destruction of family. Is that what you want? Is that what we really want? You need to withdraw your consent from as many of these institutions and their mechanisms as you possibly can. And you need to stand out and protest, and you need to create alternatives. You need to support those who've got alternative solutions, because often we talk about these things, but we do have solutions. There are people with solutions out there. Thank you for watching Deep Dive Perspective. Thank you again to Ryan and to Scott, who's not here now, but for their fantastic analysis. And do like, share, subscribe, and join us on Deep Dive Perspective, because just like Ryan and Scott, we need your backup and support. Without that, we're very likely also to be omitted sooner or later. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.